Oftentimes we think of communication as using the right words and that's all that's necessary, but with more abstract ideas, and particularly when you're in a cross-cultural and a different language situation, communication is so much more than just about using the right words. And this is one reason that I've decided to learn to weld, because I've got a project on the go that is going to be too difficult, I've decided, to try and communicate my ideas of what I want done to a third party who doesn't speak any English, and my Thai language is certainly not sufficient to be able to communicate somewhat abstract and definitely artistic, creative ideas. Let me explain. A few years ago when we first moved here, this area was getting quite wet at this time of the year when the rice is growing. So I had an idea of putting a trench down here, lining it with some plastic and backfilling it with rocks. In New Zealand, we would have done that with scoria, which is a volcanic rock, and New Zealand's full of it. But here it was just regular stones. And yeah, we just had to sort of improvise a little bit. Explaining this task to a couple of the local guys to come in and get to do this work for me was not so difficult. Between my wife and I, we were able to explain what we wanted. But what I found really interesting was after the rainy season had started and the rice fields were flooded, our neighbour came back, the guy who had done the work for us, came back to look at it because he wasn't sure, and he told us that when we described what we wanted to do, he understood well what the job was, and he did it extremely well. He did it just as I'd wanted it, but he said he didn't understand why I wanted it done. But when he came and walked here and it was solid and dry, he could understand the effectiveness of putting that drain in. So with relatively simple tasks to convey, the communication barrier is minimal. It's not vast, it's not difficult to overcome, and with the right attitude it can actually be quite a bit of fun to communicate an idea that I have to someone else to understand and to be able to carry out the task. But with my art and the reason that I've bought a welding machine, it's kind of different, because to really explain clearly somewhat abstract ideas, I've got a few drawings of them, I've got a few things like that, but there's a lot more to it than just explaining step by step, because even in my mind, I don't know the full result because it's something I've never done before. I've been working on a couple of wood carvings that I want to mount together. So this is the main piece, and then I'm going to mount them using this piece here, which is a bigger piece, and they used to be part of the same tool. It was an old rice field plough, and I want to mount them, but to do that I need to weld a few pieces and make a structure. I want this piece to be able to move, so it's a little bit complicated to communicate. And so by purchasing a welder, it was really cheap, less than $100. Watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I'll continue to watch some YouTube videos, and it's going to put a new skill under my belt as well. And once I've done a couple little tasks with it, it's actually going to work out cheaper than hiring somebody else would have been to do a single task. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it too. It's great. And I'm sure if I had a local person that was creative and if my Thai was better, then I would be able to communicate clearly what I wanted. Certainly, I've had this experience in the past, but it's not just about the words. It's about communicating with somebody that gets the concept. And it's usually, I've found, with a creative concept, with something a little bit artistic, that the person who's receiving the communication or is the other part of the conversation also needs to be a creative thinker. I was really blessed for a long time to work with such a person. Kun Win was my assistant for years, and when he came on board, I was his supervisor, and I'd already asked, what skills has he got? What's his computer skills like? And what's his English language skills like? And the response was, well, a little bit. So we learned together. I taught him a lot about using a computer. He taught me a lot about Thai language, and I was able to input a reasonable amount of good English, albeit with a good Kiwi accent. And the most important thing, though, was that we just learned to communicate with each other really well, in particular in creative areas. This is what we were working in design and photography and video. So it was all often very abstract ideas and never really set to a plan. We like to work kind of fluidly and organically as much as possible. So in communicating in this manner, you need somebody that gets you, somebody that's on the same wavelength, that's in the same flow of movement and experience. And there is always a lot of intuition required with this, and creativity. We would draw a lot. We would write things and draw things and describe things, not just with our words, but also using our creative talents and being able to draw what we had in mind. And this was very frequently very appropriate and totally effective. And so, having lived in northern Thailand for such a long time, over 20 years now, I've learned to realize that some people are going to get what I'm meaning much, much more easily than others. And usually that's when the ideas are a bit creative and a bit abstract. And the one real key that I've learned to understand about communicating to help me understand better is to think, if I'm starting to get frustrated that I'm not able to get my ideas across, I stop and ask myself, what am I not understanding well here? What am I not really grasping here? And trying to understand where the misunderstanding is entering the communication. So this one question has helped me in all manner of situations, from getting too frustrated or too annoyed with people when it's actually me who's got the limitation because my understanding is insufficient. And sure, a big part of that living cross-culturally is the language and the culture, the different way of thinking. And I'm growing more and more fascinated with the differences between the Western thinking that I've been brought up with and the Eastern thinking that I've chosen to live amongst for the last 20 or so years. And so I generally try and adapt this way. And in this situation, my adaptation is to be, rather than try and communicate, which I know is going to be really difficult, to buy a welder and learn to weld. So if you're interested to see more of the creative stuff that I'm going to be doing with this little tool, please stay tuned. And if you'd like to see more about how I approach creativity and the importance of creative thinking, please check out this video next. Thanks very much for watching.